In wrestling, what happens in the ring is sometimes only half the story. The other half unfolds backstage, where relationships, egos, and personal grudges can explode even harder than a no disqualification match. And sometimes, the most painful betrayal doesn't come from a steel chair or a sneak attack, but from real life, when a wrestler is rumored to have been involved with someone else's wife. In today's video, we're looking back at the backstage dramas that shook locker rooms and kept fans talking non-stop. So let's get started right now. Wrestling Sphere, go! 1. Shawn Michaels. This is the kind of backstage drama where longtime wrestling fans already know trouble is coming the second the names get mentioned. And no, this story didn't need a script, a promo, or even an opening bell. It had more than enough heat on its own for years, because it involved three names that were almost guaranteed to stir controversy: Sonny, Shawn Michaels, and Chris Candido. If WWE sold fans carefully written feuds on TV, behind the curtain there were sometimes stories that were far more uncomfortable than anything on screen. Sonny was one of the most prominent women of that era. Charismatic, sharp, knew how to command the spotlight, and almost always made people pay attention the moment she appeared. She wasn't just someone who looked good standing there. She had the presence and star power to become a focal point at a time when women in wrestling still weren't viewed the way they would be later on. But that same visibility also meant Sonny's personal life was scrutinized intensely. And the part people kept bringing up was her admission that she had been involved with Shawn Michaels during a period when she was still emotionally tied to Chris Candido. What made the story linger wasn't just the relationship itself, but the fact that the timelines people gave never fully matched. In some of Sonny's retellings, she said she and Candido were basically on a break at the time, so what happened with Shawn took place when, in her view, the old relationship was already badly fractured. But Candido's family, especially Chris's brother, told a different version, that Chris and Sonny were, for all practical purposes, still together. And when two conflicting versions exist side by side, fans and people in the business are obviously going to talk even more. What made it even more sensitive was that this wasn't the kind of vague rumor that just fades away. A lot of people treated it like an open secret backstage in that era. Stories about Sonny and Shawn were often repeated in that half-confirmed, half-speculative tone, just enough to keep the whole thing alive like one of wrestling's urban legends. Sonny herself was also fairly candid at times about the mistakes she made in her personal life, and that honesty made the public even more curious while also casting an even bigger shadow over her image. And Chris Candido was the one put in the most painful position. In many versions of the story that got passed around, he knew what had happened but didn't confront it head-on in the way a crowd might expect. At first, plenty of people sympathized with him, because everyone understood this was the kind of wound that's incredibly hard to deal with, especially in a locker room environment full of ego, pressure, and non-stop talk. But over time, that silence was interpreted by some as weakness. In other words, Candido was almost trapped in a match he couldn't win. Speak up and it explodes, stay quiet and people judge you anyway. Sonny's name was later tied to other rumors too, which only made her backstage reputation feel even more chaotic. Even if not every story was verified, they still helped push her image toward the center of drama, instead of being remembered only as a trailblazer for women in WWE. And that may be the most unfortunate part. Her professional legacy was often overshadowed by stories about her private life. As for Shawn Michaels, he rarely goes deep on this specific situation when looking back on his past. What he usually emphasizes is that period of his life being reckless and chaotic, followed by the changes he made later on. It's a very smart, very safe way to tell the story, and one that also avoids reopening details that could hurt other people all over again. It sounds neat and tidy, but for fans, that gap in the story is exactly why this drama never truly cooled off. 2. Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar entered wrestling like a storm, terrifying power, the aura of a destroyer, and the feeling that he was born to dominate anywhere he stepped. In the ring, Brock got almost everything far too early. But in real life, there was also a period when he was pulled into a backstage story that was nearly as loud as any major feud. And at the center of it was Sable, one of WWE's biggest faces from the Attitude Era, while she was still married to Marc Mero. What made this story so shocking wasn't just how big the names were, but how it came out. Based on accounts retold years later, Marc Mero had started to suspect his marriage was falling apart, but he didn't imagine Brock Lesnar would be the person in the middle of it. As the truth slowly became clearer, the emotional blow to Mero was obviously massive. It was no longer just a feeling that something was wrong. It was the moment when all the worst pieces finally came together into one complete picture. Meanwhile, Brock and Sable didn't seem like they were trying to keep their distance to quiet the rumors. People around them could see their connection becoming more obvious by the day. What started as a relationship that caused backstage buzz quickly turned into something serious. By 2004, Sable and Mero officially ended their marriage, and not long after that, Sable moved forward with Brock. The two married in 2006, closing out a highly controversial chapter, but also opening a new one that looked very different from what many people expected. What's especially notable is that in an industry known for brutal schedules, fame-driven pressure, and endless scandals, Brock and Sable chose a lifestyle that was almost the complete opposite. Instead of chasing the spotlight, they built a private life, focusing on family and staying out of the public eye. On screen, the Beast is all violence and domination, but in real life, Brock is known as someone who wants to be as far away from wrestling showbiz as possible. As for Mark Mero, what many people respect is the way he handled the situation. Instead of turning his pain into a public war, he chose to move forward and focus on his own life and path. That's not an easy choice, especially when your personal story becomes gossip in a world that thrives on drama. And that's exactly why this remains one of the most memorable backstage incidents. It began with hurt, passed through controversy, and somehow ended in a rare kind of lasting stability in the wrestling world. 3. Chris Benoit. This wasn't just another piece of backstage wrestling drama. This was a genuine tragedy, where a TV angle, a fractured marriage, and real-life emotions collided in such a painful way that, looking back, all anyone can really do is sigh. Let's start with the basic part first. Kevin Sullivan and Nancy Toffoloni, later known to many fans as Nancy Benoit, and on screen as Woman, got married in 1985. They were once a closely connected couple in the wrestling world, where work and private life were already incredibly hard to separate. It was an environment of constant travel, non-stop pressure, and moments where what happened on screen could slip into real life faster than anyone expected. By the mid-1990s, Kevin Sullivan was working as a booker in WCW. In that role, he helped build a storyline involving a romantic element between Nancy's character, Woman, and Chris Benoit. In theory, it was just an angle, a way to create more conflict, add texture to the story, and give fans another reason to care. That's wrestling. It happens all the time. But the problem here was that this time, the script didn't stay on television. The on-screen relationship gradually turned into a real-life one, and then everything broke apart. Nancy left Sullivan to be with Benoit. It's the kind of situation where life imitates art still feels too soft, because what it left behind wasn't an interesting anecdote, it was real hurt, real discomfort, and real consequences. Kevin Sullivan later said that by the time the storyline began, he and Nancy were already separated and heading toward divorce. According to him, their marriage had been falling apart before Chris Benoit entered the picture, not solely because of him. That detail matters, because it shows a reality far more complicated than the simple who stole who version outsiders often try to force onto it. Even so, no matter how you frame it, seeing your private life reflected and amplified on national television is a bitter experience nobody would want. By 2000, Nancy and Chris Benoit were married. For a while, it seemed like things had settled down. People kept working, kept wrestling, kept living the way the business always moves. Fast, heavy, and with very little room for anyone to stop and process old damage. Then came the horrific tragedy in 2007. Chris Benoit murdered Nancy and their young son Daniel before taking his own life. It wasn't just a shock to WWE or to the people who had worked with them. It became one of the darkest chapters in modern wrestling history. The case shook the entire wrestling world and triggered painful debates about mental health, injuries, substance use, professional pressure, and everything those involved may have been carrying for years. For Kevin Sullivan, the story did not end with a broken marriage in the past. He also had to live with long-lasting emotional aftershocks, and even face baseless conspiracy theories accusing him of being involved in the deaths of the Benoit family. Sullivan has always denied that, and law enforcement found no evidence supporting those rumors. He has shared that one of the few things that gave him some peace was Nancy's mother saying she never believed those rumors. The cruelest irony is this: according to some accounts, Nancy herself was the one who first suggested the storyline between her and Benoit. If that's true, then the angle that changed so many lives began with what seemed like a very ordinary creative decision in the business. An idea meant to serve television, and it ended up becoming the knot that opened the door to a chain of irreversible events. Sullivan later admitted he regretted allowing the line between real life and fiction to become so blurred. He could still acknowledge Benoit as an intense, committed performer, someone who felt deeply built for the business, while also never hiding the pain and frustration this entire story left behind for him, both professionally and personally. Wrestling can be scripted. Promos can be written in advance. Angles can be built to get a reaction. But the emotions, the damage, and the consequences behind them are never fake. And the story of Kevin Sullivan, Nancy Benoit, and Chris Benoit remains a tragedy, complex and haunting, that reminds people there are lines in wrestling which, once crossed, can carry a price far greater than anyone imagined. 4. Edge. When you bring up Lita and relationship drama in wrestling, you almost need to buckle up first, because this wasn't just ordinary, backstage gossip. It was an explosion that shook WWE in the mid-2000s. And among the stories that left fans both shocked and completely unable to look away, the Edge, Lita, Matt Hardy triangle is absolutely one of the most infamous. It wasn't just a celebrity breakup. It became a textbook example of how WWE could turn real-life heartbreak into compelling television, while the real-life cost was anything but small. What made this story so unique is that it didn't start out looking like the kind of scandal that would rock the locker room. Lita, whose real name is Amy Dumas, wasn't originally positioned as a major in-ring centerpiece. She first appeared as a valet, the kind of on-screen presence meant to support someone else's character. But it didn't take long for Lita to prove she was far more than decoration. With a fast, fearless style that felt completely different from the standard for women's wrestling at the time, she quickly became one of WWE's standout stars. Fans didn't just remember her look or her charisma, they remembered the feeling that whenever Lita was in a match, something explosive could happen. In 1999, Lita began dating Matt Hardy. Later, when she teamed up with Matt and Jeff Hardy in Team Extreme, the three of them created an incredibly effective combination. Great visually, great energetically, and a perfect fit together. This was the period when they were hugely loved by fans, and Matt and Lita's relationship became a familiar part of how fans saw them. But like so many stories in wrestling, what the audience saw on screen was only a small part of the picture. Behind the lights, the pressure of the schedule, injuries, and distance started creating cracks. The major turning point came in 2004, when Matt Hardy suffered a serious knee injury and had to step away from wrestling for a while. While Matt was gone from the shows, Lita was still working in WWE, and Edge, Adam Copeland, was also frequently around her. At the time, Edge was one of Matt's close friends, so their closeness didn't initially raise too many suspicions. But then, according to accounts repeated years later, the relationship between Edge and Lita went beyond friendship. In early 2005, Matt discovered messages that he could no longer ignore. A confrontation followed, and the affair was admitted. From there, everything spiraled downhill fast. Matt Hardy took his anger online, publicly venting his frustration toward Edge, Lita, and even WWE. This was before social media exploded the way it has today, but even then, it was enough to turn backstage drama into a major topic across the wrestling community. Rumors, speculation, and arguments spread everywhere. The atmosphere got so tense that any issue involving Edge was immediately linked back to the situation by fans. For many fans, the most painful part was that WWE didn't side with Matt the way they expected. Instead, he was released, reportedly for reasons tied to unprofessional behavior. That decision triggered a massive backlash. At live shows, chants of "We want Matt" echoed through arenas like an open protest. And then WWE did what the company has always been very good at. It saw the enormous heat coming from real life and pulled it straight onto television. By mid-2005, Matt Hardy was brought back. The Edge, Lita, Matt triangle officially became a storyline. From that point on, the line between kayfabe and real life was almost completely blurred. Fans knew the story was rooted in reality, so every promo, every stare, and every confrontation carried an uncomfortable sense of authenticity. Edge and Lita became a heavily hated heel duo, while Matt was cast as the betrayed, furious victim. The feud gave WWE a massive amount of heat, and it also became a key launchpad that helped Edge break deeper into the main event scene and eventually grow into one of the company's biggest stars. The irony is that, from a performance standpoint, this storyline actually gave Lita one of her strongest character runs. She later admitted she regretted what happened in real life, but also recognized that the period forced her to dig deeper emotionally, act more, and create a memorable heel version of herself. Still, the darker side was the heaviest part of all. Lita faced an intense wave of abuse from fans for a long time, and she has spoken multiple times about the double standard she had to carry, where the backlash aimed at her was often far harsher than what the men in the same story received. Later on, each person went in a different direction. Lita left WWE, Edge kept climbing to the top, and Matt Hardy reinvented himself multiple times across different companies. Over time, Edge and Matt made peace and came to see the whole situation as something from the past. But this incident is still brought up again and again, not just because of how dramatic it was, but because it exposed both the brightest and darkest sides of wrestling, the ability to turn real emotion into captivating content, and the very real price people pay once the lights go down. 5. CM Punk. Alright, now we get to the kind of backstage drama that WWE fans can argue about forever. CM Punk, Lita, and AJ Lee. This is the kind of story where just naming those three is enough to split the community into camps. The "it was just a coincidence" camp, the "it's not that simple" camp, and the "hold on, let me see the timeline first" camp. What makes this story stand out is that it wasn't just a loud relationship situation. It also had the added layer of idol-to-successor dynamics, with emotions unfolding way too close together inside the same wrestling world. AJ Lee had openly said for years that she idolized Lita as a kid. There's even an old clip from the early 2000s showing AJ absolutely thrilled to meet Lita, a genuinely sweet fan-meets-idol moment, nothing more. Then time passed, AJ entered WWE, ended up sharing the stage with the woman she once looked up to, and eventually got pulled into a relationship drama involving CM Punk, who had previously dated Lita. That detail alone gives the whole story the feel of a strange, fated loop in wrestling showbiz. As for the timeline, the part people talked about most was this. Punk and Lita were believed to have started dating around 2009 and stayed together for several years after that. During that stretch, AJ Lee joined WWE, 2010, gradually rose in prominence, and became fairly close with Punk. From there, everything started drifting into the sensitive rumor zone. By late 2013, Punk and AJ were appearing together publicly, which sparked speculation that the emotional connection between them may have started earlier than the point when Punk's relationship with Lita had truly ended. Put more plainly, what got fans buzzing wasn't just that Punk and AJ got together. It was the classic question behind every relationship drama: when did it actually begin? And as usual in wrestling, where rumors spread faster than match results, the backstage whispers took off immediately. There was plenty of speculation that Punk and AJ had formed an emotional bond before going public, possibly while Punk was still with Lita. But one thing needs to be emphasized. Most of the heaviest claims came from fan theories, second-hand accounts, or people piecing together timelines, not from a direct, clear confirmation by everyone involved. What made the story even harder to ignore was AJ's autobiography, where she described her relationship with Punk as complicated, as if the feelings had existed long before they officially became a couple. She also mentioned that the two of them spent years denying those feelings, moving through other relationships, and only later truly ending up together. That kind of reflection made many fans believe this was far more layered than a romance that simply began after a clean breakup. One notable public appearance of Punk and AJ as a couple was at a Chicago Cubs baseball game in 2013, right around the time many people believed the Punk-Lita relationship had cooled off significantly. Then, in June 2014, Punk and AJ got married in a private ceremony. The irony is that Punk reportedly received his WWE termination letter on the same day as the wedding, a detail that made an already tense story feel even more cinematic. From that point on, Punk and AJ kept their private life relatively low-key, focusing on their careers and marriage. As for Lita, she never directly confirmed or fully broke down the rumors surrounding this timeline. While there were reports of backstage tension, especially around the 2014 Hall of Fame period, none of it ever moved far beyond speculation. And that's exactly why this story has lasted so long. Not because anyone said too much, but because everyone said too little, leaving behind a pile of fragments for fans to assemble into a picture that still doesn't have one agreed-upon answer. 6. Triple H. Chyna wasn't just a standout female wrestler. She was a rare phenomenon in WWE during the Attitude Era, the kind of character who shows up once and makes the whole industry rethink what women could be on a wrestling stage. When she debuted in 1997 as the Enforcer standing beside Triple H, Chyna instantly felt different. cold, dominant, and clearly not built as a character who existed just to support someone else. When she entered the frame, she came to take it over. From there, Chyna kept breaking barriers. She mixed it up with male wrestlers, became part of major storylines, and then reached a historic milestone by becoming the first woman to win the Intercontinental Championship. To fans, she wasn't just part of the game, she was changing the rules of it. And alongside her on-screen success, Chyna's real-life relationship with Triple H also became something fans paid close attention to, especially since both of them were so closely tied to D-Generation X. That's exactly why, when backstage talk started about Triple H growing closer and closer to Stephanie McMahon, the story immediately became sensitive. At first, a lot of people treated it like just another rumor in wrestling, something that always exists around WWE behind the scenes. But as the story has been told and retold over the years, Chyna was deeply hurt when she realized her relationship with Triple H was no longer what it used to be, while Triple H and Stephanie were becoming increasingly public. What made this story so haunting for many fans wasn't only the romance angle, it was the feeling that everything flipped so fast. On one side, there was Chyna, someone who had been incredibly important to the Attitude Era. On the other side was Stephanie McMahon, a figure tied to the highest level of power in the company. Once personal conflict and the workplace environment got mixed together, the ending was almost never going to be peaceful. Not long after, Chyna left WWE, leaving behind the lingering sense that an icon who could have gone even further was cut off too soon. And from that point on, the Triple H Chyna Stephanie story became one of the most talked about backstage dramas ever, not just because of the scandal, but because it became linked to the decline of a star who once looked powerful enough to bend every stereotype in the business. 7. Shawn Stasiac. Now we get to a backstage story that truly feels like no writer needed. This is already enough drama. Terri Runnels, her turbulent marriage to Dustin Runnels, Goldust, and her controversial relationship with Shawn Stasiac. From a distance, it sounds like an Attitude Era storyline. Love, cracks in a marriage, betrayal, accusations, back-and-forth shots, and fallout that lasted for years. The biggest difference is this: none of it happened under the arena lights. It happened in real life, where consequences can't be rewound like a promo segment. Terri and Dustin got married in 1993, during a period when both were building a life and career in the non-stop chaos of the wrestling world. When she arrived in WWE, Terri wasn't just a wrestler's wife standing backstage. As Molina, the character closely associated with Goldust, she became a key part of one of the most memorable acts of that era. On screen, the two had a unique presence, mysterious, eye-catching, compelling, and different enough that fans remembered them right away. But like many couples in wrestling, the spotlight in front of the camera didn't mean peace behind the curtain. As this story is usually told, Terri and Dustin's marriage gradually developed serious cracks, with personal issues and life pressure playing major roles. In particular, Dustin's struggles with substance abuse reportedly put heavy strain on the family. When someone is battling problems like that, everything around them gets pulled into the spiral: work, emotions, and trust between two people. And that's often when relationships begin to slide, not with one huge explosion, but with a long buildup of accumulated hurt. Then came the most controversial part of the story. Terri was linked to an extramarital relationship with Shawn Stasiac while she was still married to Dustin. That detail pushed the situation beyond normal backstage gossip and into full scandal territory. In the public eye, it looked like gasoline poured onto a marriage that was already fragile. By 1999, Terri and Dustin divorced, and many people viewed that relationship as a major factor in the breakup. During that same noisy period, Dustin also accused Terri of being involved with Jake the Snake Roberts, something Terri strongly denied, with a response that became well known for how firmly she rejected the claim. Those public accusations and denials pushed the whole situation even further beyond the boundaries of ordinary private life. What made this story feel especially wrestling was how the real-life drama later spilled back onto television. When Shawn Stasiac appeared with a meat gimmick and was paired with Terri in the Pretty Mean Sisters, fans immediately started reading into every glance, every interaction, and every shared moment on screen. In wrestling, the line between kayfabe and reality is already blurry. Add a real-life situation full of rumors, and it becomes the perfect breeding ground for speculation. So their on-screen chemistry was no longer viewed as just performance or creative booking. It became tied to the question every fan loves to ask: is this an angle, or is this real? But the downside of this kind of drama is always obvious. it can swallow everything a person accomplished. With Terry, unfortunately, a lot of conversations about her Attitude-era legacy often get dragged back to the relationship scandal instead of focusing on her professional contributions, her skill as a manager, and the role she played in many iconic moments. For Stasiac, the story also became a sensitive part of his public image, even though he stayed relatively private about personal details. Some things only get dug into more the more you try to explain them, so sometimes silence becomes the only way to keep moving forward. As for Dustin, the years that followed brought many more turns in his life, including legal troubles and personal hardships that kept public attention on him. Terry later publicly criticized some of Dustin's behavior, especially when it affected their family and their daughter, Dakota. Even so, one thing worth noting is that over time, after all the bitterness and heartbreak, Terry and Dustin were reportedly able to maintain a more civil relationship for the sake of their child. In a story full of pain, that may be the rare part that feels mature and healing. 8. Batista. Now we get to one of the most frequently repeated backstage dramas whenever people talk about WWE in the 2000s. Dave Bautista, Molina Perez, and John Morrison. This is the kind of story where just naming those three immediately splits fans into different camps. Some defend, some blame, and some just want to dig up the timeline to figure out where everything really began and ended. And yes, this case has all the ingredients you'd expect. A relationship falling apart, locker room rumors, image damage, and fallout that lasted for years. The timeline most people point to starts in 2006. Around that time, Bautista had just finalized his divorce from his second wife, Angie, and Molina was also said to have hit a rough patch and split from John Morrison around a similar period. Not long after, Bautista and Molina started being mentioned together in backstage stories, which triggered a wave of talk. What made this drama blow up more than usual was that it didn't stay at the level of people in the business are saying it. Bautista addressed it directly in his autobiography. According to Bautista's version, Morrison knew about the relationship, and he stated that everything began only after the breakups had already happened. On paper, that sounds like a clear explanation. But in wrestling, where image, ego, and backstage status are always under a microscope, even a statement like that can create a whole new round of controversy. Some fans and people in the industry saw it as honesty. Others felt the way it was told came off too blunt, lacking tact, and unintentionally turned an already sensitive situation into a long-running target for criticism. The person placed under the biggest microscope at the time was Morrison. The fact that he didn't confront it head-on and didn't turn his private life into a public response led to intense debate. Some saw that as calm, mature, and a sign that he refused to let drama consume his career. But the other side viewed that silence as a lack of decisiveness, and some even felt it affected how he was perceived in the locker room. That's where some especially harsh comments from others started to surface, including very direct remarks from former wrestlers, which only made the fan arguments even louder. As for Molina, this was a period when her talent and controversy were almost always discussed together. In 2007, she won her first WWE Women's Championship, a milestone she absolutely earned based on her in-ring ability, character work, and TV presence. But that success was also overshadowed by speculation that her personal relationships may have influenced her push. That's one of the unfair parts of scandals like this. Real professional accomplishments often get weighed against rumors instead of the work itself. What made the story even more tangled is that Molina later denied the relationship in a 2015 interview and described Bautista as a very good friend. So with the same situation, the public ended up with two different versions to hold on to. And when the people involved don't all confirm the same timeline, the drama lasts even longer, because everyone can choose the version they want to believe. By many accounts, the relationship between Bautista and Molina only lasted a few months. After that, Molina and Morrison reconciled, but the aftershocks didn't disappear right away. Molina's image in the locker room continued to come with mixed opinions. Some people didn't get along with her, while others spoke highly of her work ethic and her passion for wrestling. That tension is what made her such a very WWE figure, clearly talented, yet constantly surrounded by debate. As for Morrison, many fans still believe this situation affected the trajectory of his career in WWE to some degree, even if it's hard to measure exactly how much. What stands out, though, is that despite everything, he later publicly supported Molina after she left WWE. And maybe that's the detail that makes this story more memorable than the scandal itself. Underneath all the noise, some people still chose to handle things with class instead of turning real life into a live promo. 9. John Cena. Now let's move to a real-life drama that was even juicier than a lot of in-ring storylines. The story surrounding John Cena's first marriage, the highly publicized divorce, and the wave of cheating rumors that kept fans arguing for years. This is the kind of situation where the less the people involved say, the more the crowd starts guessing. And that's very wrestling. When the full truth isn't clear, rumors will write the rest on their own. John Cena married Elizabeth Huberdeau, often described as his high school sweetheart, in 2009. With Cena's image as WWE's top star, clean-cut, disciplined, and almost flawless in public, many fans saw that marriage as a rare stable chapter in the middle of an intense schedule. But in 2012, everything fell apart when Cena filed for divorce. And honestly, that alone was enough to send the speculation machine into overdrive. One of the reasons mentioned for tension between them was home remodeling. It sounds minor, but anyone who has lived with a partner understands how disagreements over living space, layout, furniture choices, or renovation plans can quickly turn into major fights, especially if the relationship already has cracks. To the public, that detail actually made the story even more dramatic, because it felt so ordinary compared to Cena's superhuman image. Turns out, outside the ring, some of the hardest collisions come from very normal decisions. But the part that made this drama stick in the fan community wasn't just the divorce, it was the rumors that exploded right after. While the situation was still fresh, speculation started spreading that Cena may have had romantic involvement with certain WWE performers, and the name most often pulled into it was Mickie James. The rumors grew even more when Kenny Dykstra, Mickey's former fiancé, was said to have made comments and hints that gave fans even more reason to connect the dots in the most sensational way possible. The problem is, those rumors created a very familiar wrestling gossip effect. No clear confirmation, but extremely fast spread. Some fans started questioning Cena's role model image, while Mickie James also faced serious pressure even as she stayed focused on work. Once your name gets attached to a hot story, right or wrong often stops being the thing that drives public reaction. Emotion does. Later on, Mickie James addressed the allegations in a way that rejected much of what had been exaggerated, and she also suggested that some people stirred the story up for attention. That didn't make the controversy disappear overnight, but it did highlight an important point. A lot of the details in the story existed at the level of claims, assumptions, and hearsay, not hard conclusions. Even so, fans split into sides like they always do. Some believed in Cena's public image, while others felt there was a completely different person behind the spotlight. Social media became a non-stop debate zone, and every old or new comment got dragged back out and dissected. What's notable is that Cena mostly chose silence. No loud counterattacks, no public PR war, and no turning the situation into an open back and forth. In a world where saying more can easily pour gasoline on the fire, that was arguably a smart move. It didn't completely kill the rumors, but it helped keep the story from growing even more out of control. Another layer that made fans talk even more was that WWE had previously paired Cena and Mickie in an on-screen romantic direction. For some people, that was just normal booking. But for anyone who had already heard the backstage rumors, it was instantly viewed through a different lens. Some found it compelling because it felt half real, half scripted, while others thought it felt awkward and forced. Later, Mickie also shared that the direction made her uncomfortable and felt unfocused, so it didn't last very long. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Huberdeau's side added more tension to the divorce when she reportedly challenged the prenuptial agreement and included allegations involving unfavorable evidence. However, those allegations were later withdrawn, and the divorce was ultimately settled. And because the ending never came with a full public explanation, the entire story became even more fertile ground for speculation. Looking back, this drama isn't just about John Cena or a failed marriage. It also shows how a star's public image, backstage rumors, and fan reactions can twist together into a spiral that's incredibly hard to untangle. And in Cena's case, what kept the story alive wasn't too many confirmed facts, it was the opposite, too many empty spaces. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive backstage drama content, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe to Wrestling Sphere to support the channel. And for now, I'll see you in the next video.